everyone. This is Jason Rodriguez. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Z Prime. Today, the privilege of being joined by Dr. Anil Rawal, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of IntelliSmart. Anil, how are you doing this evening?
Yeah, great, Jason, and really nice to be with you.
You as well. Thank you so much for being part of the WE3 conference where we're discussing key issues of net zero, the energy transition, e-mobility, and the future of smart energy. And I know your company is doing some very innovative work there in India, and would love for you to start off with first just telling us and our audience a little bit more about IntelliSmart and what you guys do.
Sure, Jason. First, thanks a lot for having me, and I think this is a very important topic when you talk about energy transition. And in current times, it's very, very relevant, and the whole humanity, I would say, is impacted by this. And this is the time when we should think a lot more on these issues. And I would say that this whole discussion would add lots of value to the whole topic. Right. So coming to IntelliSmart, Jason. So IntelliSmart is a joint venture of WESL, which is Energy Efficiency Services Limited, a leading ESCO in the country, which is itself a joint venture of some of the public sector undertakings of Government of India. And another partner, another shareholder in IntelliSmart is National Investment Infra Fund, which is a Government of India Ministry of Finance backed fund. And it's this fund actually invests in infra sector in various fields, including power as well as roads and highways and many other things, logistics, etc., etc. So NIF has invested in us as a majority partner for funding the infra projects in the country. And when it comes to power infra, then obviously distribution is a critical part of the story. Power distribution is a weaker, I would say, element in the whole power value chain. And utilities in the country has been having reasonably high losses in past, and which actually has been making them bleed operationally and financially. And that's where this country is having smart metering program, a massive digital transformation program, which is one of the largest in the world. And IntelliSmart is supposed to be having this as a key mandate to participate in these projects and do it best in terms of shouldering this responsibility of rolling out smart metering in the country.
Thank you for that very thorough introduction. So just to dive right in, you talked about the work that IntelliSmart is doing, particularly in digital technologies, and we know that India has some pretty bold goals of meeting net zero. So how do you guys see advanced digital technologies can help advance kind of India's net zero targets?
Right. So, as you rightly brought out, India has large commitment on net zero. With the COP26, it actually the commitment has been more crystallized, more precipitated in terms of efforts, and technology is the solution when it comes to meeting these targets. So, when you talk about technology, it's more related to decarbonization through digitalization, and when you talk about decarbonization, obviously if we are adding renewables at very large quantum, one of the fastest in the world. Country has moved step to step and reached a level where it's having a significantly large contribution coming from renewable energy. But when you add renewables, there's a significant upstream challenge in terms of integration of renewable energy into the sector because of natural variability they bring in with themselves, and managing them into grid and integrating them requires massive grid flexibility. Incidentally, India has not been doing much on the hydropower or on the gas generation, gas-based power generation, which are more maneuverable and flexible modes of power generation, and that actually makes grid less and less flexible. So we have these contradictory and conflicting targets where you have to have more and more renewables, which have their variability, and you have a grid which is actually leaving less of margin for you to play the flexibility. So there, the supply side, it's very difficult to handle. So you have to work on the demand side. So demand side can be best done when you actually know the granular demand. From knowing the granular demand, you have to have a consumer-based data which is coming to you in real time. And that's where the technology on the last mile becomes very critical. From consumer and upwards, this journey is to be traveled, that the whole value chain from transformer to the consumer has to be properly digitalized through smart metering and the data capture, as well as the meters at the transformer level so have to have better energy accounting, capturing this data onto cloud computing, doing data analysis, and building a proper DSM based approach that can allow the renewable integration. So there is a large value chain starting from the generation side to the consumer side. The various pockets of it are to be digitalized, and so this actually requires significant technological upgradation. That's the main task which is running in the country.
And when you look at some of the more advanced AI, machine learning, which some of the work that you guys are doing, how is when you get when you move up the sophistication of those analytics, how can that also further help, or how are you seeing that help with some of your partners?
All right, it's an excellent question. So let's just go a bit deeper onto the thought we were having 2 minutes back. That you can have enormous data coming at real time, really cramping up into your cloud solutioning. But then what do you do with this data? Uh, so one, you can have the data, do the billing to the consumer, but is that the end of it? Exactly not. That's a start point. Okay. So once you have this massive data, you have scope of doing analysis. You have the scope of big data to be churned and to be analyzed deeply to know various things. For example, what are the consumption patterns? What are the appliance signatures? Right? Which appliances of the consumers are consuming what kind of power? Right? Which appliances can be actually given out and can be replaced. Similarly, which consumer is consuming how much of the power and what time they're consuming. You can apply time of use, time of day, which actually so far has not been done in the country. So similarly, which consumers are pumping in power because renewable in terms of solar rooftop is also in a significant way coming and building up in the country. So which consumers can pump in the power, which are the consumers which are buying more power and pumping less. Similarly, another side of the story could be that you can do the theft analysis, which could be even proactive. When I say proactive, the predictive one, when I'm saying that basically means which are the pockets of the consumers which are more vulnerable in terms of going for the theft. Because large number of consumers in the country have not been paying frankly in past, which has led to all sorts of problems. So some amount of change of approach is, or it's a more of social economic change which is required to be done. When you actually carry out this, all sorts of risks are there. So that risk identification, predictive theft analysis, and in addition to that, network asset management. So you cannot deploy resources all across. Once you know which are the network elements which are more vulnerable through data analysis, then you can actually have far more optimized network management. So these are a few I would say use cases which are based on the big data analysis. And then once you have this data, then you can apply machine learning in having more and more predictive data. So that actually has significant upside, additional revenue possibilities for distribution companies. In addition to their tying up with appliance manufacturers and actually replacing the appliances which are guzzlers and have gone out of the shape in terms of excessive consumption of power. So there are multiple possibilities which play out when you actually go deeper into data, analyze that, and do the applied machine learning.
To maybe also build off that just a little, because you definitely mentioned the customer, and a lot of the what we're talking about here at We3 is where the customer fits and how we build to the customer. So how are you seeing the customer being able to benefit from some of these emerging technologies, or the customer experience?
Certainly. So I would believe unless we touch upon the customer and really give them services, then smart metering program is not going anywhere. First of all, customer has to be engaged and has to be bring on board to this program. Towards that, a significant contribution is smart meter mobile app. Right. So that app is a tool in the hands of the customer. So if you provide this application to the customer, the whole management of their consumption in terms of their knowledge of which are the appliances consuming what is the energy consumption in different periods, in different times of the day, by which appliances, what, how much quantity, all this becomes very clear when the customer did charged in past, what are the balance pending, when the customer should charge again, seasonal variations and many other things usually come into play. That becomes an enabling a tool in the hands of the customer. I would say we have done lots of work in the country, and one Bharat Smart Mobile app was launched recently where we had worked with the team. So I think these are some of the very innovative ideas which we need to further build when it comes to customer engagement on the smart metering program.
And as you mentioned, to get there, right, we need to build this advanced metering infrastructure, the smart metering or smart grid. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you see in working with the partners and the utilities there in your territory or the ones in India in general?
Yeah, so frankly, the biggest challenge, if you ask me, is in terms of inertia.
Hmm.
Inertia of not changing. It has been years that utilities have been living in specific fashion, and because why they are living like that is because their consumers are living in specific fashion. When I say living, basically it means their approach and their attitude towards power being consumed and it being metered. Right, so there has been serious resistance on the ground in terms of now being shifting to a approach where user must pay is playing out. Actually, there has been large part of the history where many users have not been paying anything or they've been underpaying. There have been unfortunate, I would say, hand in glove situations on the ground, and that has made the utilities suffer also. So there's inertia in changing their vested interests at various levels. So that's the biggest challenge I would say when something like a smart meter and the technology come into picture. Technology is always related with transparency. So it brings in massive amount of transparency things and all the motives which are not aligned to the mainstream get actually out of the picture. And so that becomes a significant challenge in rolling out the technology. So that's a typical challenge. In addition to that, if you ask me, there is such no challenge other than the scale is humongous, right? So we are talking about 50 million households, which actually is very large number when it comes to rolling out a program in mission mode. But I would believe there's a large political and economic and policy and regulatory commitment now from government, which actually is translating into making this program a reality. So I would be very hopeful from this program onwards that this actually would translate and we'll see a brighter side. Already IntelliSmart has done the first project on competitive mode under the program, which has been running very successfully. We already achieved go live in Assam, which is for 600,000 meters. So that's already on, and then the tendering process for about I would believe if not less than 60 million meters is already in process. So I would believe the whole journey has started in a big way, and these challenges go down as we go forward.
So are there any specific goals in terms of trying to get to, is it 50, 90% or 100% rollout of smart metering?
Yeah. So overall target is for 250 million.
Oh,
The
wow.
target has been broken into two parts. First is 100 million. 100 million is in first 2 years, starting from now. So that's first part, and second phase would be for rest of it, right? So this 250 million journey has been divided into two parts actually. So first phase is already on.
Wow, that's very impressive. It's really hard to comprehend those numbers. So in the U.S., there's maybe 115 million meters there. So you're almost doubling, more than doubling the amount
That's what.
here in a very very short timeline compared to how smart metering rollout has been in the U.S. So it's great to hear that that journey has already begun. But this, we're coming into COP27 here, and I know that climate change and climate action is top of mind here at the conference, but it's also something that IntelliSmart is very vocal on and has a very strong initiative on. So I'd love to hear how you also see how digitalization could also impact the power sector in terms of addressing climate action.
Climate action is mainly dependent on decarbonization. I would say it has significant contribution to coming from decarbonization. And decarbonization is one word, but has serious implications, right? Particularly when you talk about decarbonization through renewable energy, it has massive manifestations for the grid as such, and reliability of the grid, and flexibility of the grid, and various other aspects. So decarbonization cannot happen without digitalization, right? So digitalization would actually mean end to end from the generation of the power till that time, till the end of the consumer, right? So technology is critical player when it comes to climate action through particular decarbonization and carbon footprint reduction. So India has already committed for net zero, which actually was never so strong commitment ever in past. And the government of India has come up with five elements of this program, which are in full swing, which basically comprise of not only reducing dependence on fossil fuel, but also on increasing renewable, as well as increasing the footprint of decarbonized energy across the value chain in the sector. So obviously it has to happen not without digitalization. And as I said, digitalization has to touch the consumers. It cannot be without engaging the consumer, and consumer engagement can only happen when then actually the digital instruments like smart meter reach to the every household. That's what we are trying to do and aid to the whole program of climate action in the country.
Thank you. So on it's a very unique partnership that formed IntelliSmart, and I think we're going to need more of these innovative approaches. So what other types of partners should be embraced along this path to meet the decarbonization goals that traditionally, as the power sector probably has not been as open to unique partnerships? So what are the type of partners or technology partners that IntelliSmart is looking to partner with to help meet some of their goals and initiatives?
Certainly, yes. So, when we are talking about digitalization leading to decarbonization, climate action, it actually involves multiple stakeholders. It involves stakeholders which are largely on the high on technology, technology engaging onto the cloud computing, technology having the applications, particularly for the consumers. As I said, consumer mobile app is one of the very critical component of the story for engaging the consumer. What we are believing in strongly is that this cannot be push program, that you push the things to the consumer. It has to be having some of the pull engaged in it. When you have a smart meter which you are installing to the consumer premise, it should not only be for measuring electricity, right? It has to go beyond, because it's an instrument, it's an intrusion into the house and the privacy of the consumer. You have to think beyond just selling and counting power, actually, right? So technology which can make my smart meters actually far more smarter than only measuring electricity, can do provide many services through smart meter. Can it be single window into the home, including the Wi-Fi, broadband services? Say, for example, the TV channels, all those services which go into the home, can they pass through this smart meter? Can smart meter could be single entry? So that's the technology we have to work on. In addition to that, we need technology part from the communication side, whether we are depending on certain communications which are actually costly. For my pumping my data, I don't need such wide broadband or bandwidth. Can I do with cheaper technology when it comes to communication, which could be more reliable. Lots of work has to happen on that. Similarly, on handheld system, which are the critical application for smart metering, the meter data management systems, they are to be more efficient, more cost effective. Then similarly, cloud. We are consuming too much of cloud services when it comes to 250 million smart meters, pumping data all the time, day and night, real time. It's humongous data. So data management is another area where we have to work far more. And data analytics, as you rightly touched upon, we have really not even scratched the surface when it comes to data analytics. So we need many partners on that side. So all this ecosystem actually requires further and further strengthening. So far, frankly, we are not very deep onto technological innovation, all of the value chain, starting from meter, which could be multifarious applications onto the consumer, going to the communication, going to the cloud applications, and going to the consumer applications. Right? We have all across the value chain. We have to add into efficiency, cost effectiveness, and in terms of the savings when it comes to the whole cost of the value chain is concerned. So lots of work is happening. We are already partnering with many technology solution providers, and we're looking forward to build actually across the value chain more and more.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and thank you for sharing. So, as we're talking a lot about the things that are happening now and some bold initiatives, but as my final question, something I would really love to get your insight on is as you see and you look out 10 years or so with all this innovation happening rapidly, not just in the US or India, but how do you see like the power sector maybe being different in the next 10 to 15 years?
So excellent question, Jason. I would really be happy answering because this is my dream. When I am actually meeting with my team, we are committing a lot to this whole transformation program, which is over in the country. We are looking forward to a situation where this grid becomes real smart grid. Smart grid actually basically means a real-time responsive grid. There's a significant gap between where we stand and where we have to be. So that's my first vision in the process, that my consumers are having benefits, or say by having the solutions in their hand through mobile apps, from consumer side to the grid side. It has to be responsive grid. I would believe that now we stand at about 18% of energy in terms of energy. When it comes to infusion through renewables, in terms of capacity, we are 30%. I would be really visioning 50% of contribution of renewable, grid flexible to handle this kind of variability, and then over and above, consumer having the really the facilities and benefits which come out of the grid. Today, consumer actually has no say on the grid. There is no time of day, time of use services. Actually, consumer has no say when say consumer is traveling 5 days, 10 days, still they are being billed. Many other applications which are actually go to consumer to make them really empowered in terms of they being part of this grid, and at the same time, grid become more and more cost economic also. Actually, currently the costs are such which would be becoming prohibitive when it comes to industry side. So it will make industry less and less competitive if we keep adding costs like this. So I'm actually visioning a solutioning and cost effectiveness through technology also. Right. So these are the few things which are sort of aspirations for us to achieve on when we go on maybe 5 to 7 years. I'm sure that it would be looking very differently than what.
And Neil, it's been such a pleasure hearing from you and the work you're doing and leading there at IntelliSmart. So on behalf of Z Prime and Smart Energy Water and the WE3 2022 conference, we thank you so much for your time and for your insights. And we want to continue to watch and share and look at all the great things you're doing. So thank you so much for your time today, and I appreciate you being a part of WE3.
Thanks a lot, Jason. It's really pleasure to be part of it, and looking forward to further deliberations on this, and would be keen to hear and discuss further the line. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.